For 1992, the traditional classic marathon received a new sponsor, with Mitsubishi Motors lending their name to the prestigious event as they celebrated their 75th anniversary. The entry was as varied as ever, with over 95 crews from 14 different countries taking part in Europe's longest classic car rally. Day one would take the cars from Scheveningen across Belgium and into Koblenz for the overnight halt, through Germany to Bamberg for the second day, and day three into Czechoslovakia and Austria, then towards Italy at the Stelvio Pass on the final day. The first car away was that of four-time Circuit of Ireland winner Ronnie McCartney, partnered by Dr. Beattie Crawford, the crew that dominated last year's event. Competition, though, in 1992 would be a good deal tougher. Away from the start, the cars had to make their way towards Huy, the Belgian town square holding the first time control. On the road sections, Jeremy Welch in Dad Dennis's Healey 3000 makes his way towards Huy. Into the Belgian town square come Mike and Gina Barker in their Jaguar XK120, proprietors of the Midland Motor Museum. The Belgian town square had brought the crowds out in force to look at some famous cars and some famous drivers. The first special test was in Belgium at Modave, and again it was McCartney first away into the demanding test. The little Mini will be well suited to the tight roads of Modave, with some tight chicanes and also some tight hairpins to show its cornering ability in full force. Application of the handbrake necessary around some of the hairpins, and McCartney, foot down, heads off. Following him, the Ferrari 250 of Michel Opré, the Dutchman, really wowing the crowds with not only the sight of the car, but also the noise. On board with Dutchman Gijs van Lennep with the Austin Healey 3000. He'd borrowed this car from the Dutch Healey Club, and they were hoping it would be returned to them in the pristine condition that it started the event in. The ex-Grand Prix driver and ex-Le Mans winner feeds in the power and charges through the narrow lanes on the Modave test. Husband and wife team Rick and Jane Bourne, proprietors of Brands Hatch Morgans, were going well in their +4, while the photographers were out in force to snap the sideways action of fellow photographer Frank Fennell. More minis, number 12, the Belgian pairing of Jean-Louis Goblet and Alain Lopez. The Porsche 356 of Peter Kreigelsteiner and Paul Howcroft wasn't to last very long, though. True opposite lot from the Jaguar E-Type of David Bennett and Dave Assel, while the Spanish crew of Simpson Degui and Beaufil were going well in their Lotus Cortina. Norwegian John Horgan, complete with Fluffy Toy, sets off in his MGB. Other MGBs were in the hands of ex-Grand Prix driver Sterling Moss. Dutch saloon car champion, lady driver Henny Hemmers, was driving this Volvo and going for the Coupe des Dames ladies' prize. Anthony Hussey, who when not driving this Lancia Aurelia Spider is the man behind the Connolly Leather Company, was 44th and enjoying not only the Belgian roads, but also the weather. The survivors made their way into Koblenz for a well-earned rest and the opportunity to carry out any repairs that the cars may need. At the end of day one, the results saw that Minis were dominating the field. Frank Fennell was leading from Nick Barrow, with Alain Lopez in third. The Little Triumph GT6 was fourth of Angus Watt, Rick Bourne's Morgan fifth, and the MGB of John Horglen was in sixth place. With a little trepidation, the crews set off on day two of the Classic Marathon and the first special test of the day at Trebour in Germany. Through the artificial chicanes designed to keep the speeds down goes the Little Triumph GT6. Up towards the end of the test, the Morgan +4 of Rick and Jane Bourne. Jane about to leap out, run round the car and stop the clock, signifying that the test is over. The Ferrari was still going well in Michel Opré's hands, fastest here. The Little Minis, still proving their cornering ability, were losing out in straight line speed, but drive of talent was making up for it in Ronnie McCartney's case. Burning rubber, away from the line, the E-Type Jaguar of David Bennett and David Assel had now got over its opposite lock fetish, but had developed a liking for barriers instead. One slight dent, and away they go again. The Sunbeam Tiger of Jane and husband Paul Wignall arrives at the end of the test, brakes locked on. Out gets Paul to stop the clock, while further back the MGB of Malcolm Gammons was getting a little bit confused by the lack of signs on the barriers. Having discovered reverse gear and then first again, it was back off into the test. The pristine Jaguar XK120 of Mike and Gina Barker threads gingerly through the chicane. At the end of the test, a Mitsubishi reception greeted the crews, very enthusiastic crowds on hand at the end of Trebour. Sterling Moss, as ever, was the centre of attention, the former Grand Prix driver busily signing autographs. But later in the day, at the Hagenbrücken regularity test, it was waterproof's time as the heavens opened and drenched the crews. The regularity tests see the crews having to stick to a precise speed for an unknown distance, and there are points deducted should you go too quickly or too slowly. Moss was partnered by Zoe Heritage, master of the regularity tests, and he was fairly confident. Away from Hagenbrücken, it was back to Bamberg, and even on road sections some cars can have problems. Rosemary Smith's Sunbeam Tiger, for example, was struck by lightning, but being sponsored by Autoglass, who make car windscreens, she was able to carry on. The day had seen Frank Fennell extend his lead further with the Mini Cooper S. Angus Watt was second with the Triumph GT6, and Alain Lopez third with his Mini. The Barrows were fourth, Ignacio Sonsendegui fifth, and Sterling Moss was now up into sixth place. Day 3, into Czechoslovakia, and the crews on the Polenia special test. Robert Shaw with the Healey 3000, the fastest of the cars. The Spaniards in their Lotus Cortina were finding the roads somewhat slippery and almost ended their rally here. After much engine revving and tyre squealing, the car finally found traction again and the Spaniards were back once more onto the test. Last year's winner, Ronnie McCartney, was down in 11th with a lot of work to do. Not surprising then that he was trying so hard in the Mini. 14th overall was Mark Tipping's Hillman Imp, getting at some terrifying angles at times. The weather was being kinder to the Barkers in the XK120 today, the rain gear put away, and almost time to get out the sun lotion. The castle at Zinkovi in the heart of Czechoslovakia played host to a special lunch halt for the crews. While some fascinated locals wandered round the grounds and courtyard of the castle, choosing their favourites from the vast array of cars. The crews, though, were soon back to work on the Putkoff special test. Away go Moss and Zoe Heritage in the MGB. Bruce Stevens and Ian Claridge were a pairing aiming for an elusive Gold Cup. 23rd now was number 23, the MGB of Malcolm Gammons. Delectable machinery in the shape of the Porsche of Klaus Treuder and Lothar Schmitz. Behind them, Igor Kolodochko obviously has a dislike for cameramen. The Porsche 356A of Morsink and Rietbergen was improving all the time, while the little Healey Sprite Mark 1, or Frog Eye if you prefer, of John Hunter was 3 places from last. Out of the rally, though, was Ronnie McCartney.
Unfortunately, one of the fan blades just came off and went through the radiator, and it's damaged it. We've got the radiator off the car and thought we could have maybe fiberglassed it or razor pounded up, but it's too badly damaged, so I doubt that's our Mitsubishi Marathon this year going.
So no repeat of victory in 1992 for McCartney and Dr. Beattie Crawford. Other Minis fell foul of the problems on day 3, such as Frank Fennell, who was now well out of the top 6. The new leaders were Alain Lopez and Jean-Louis Goblet from the Barrows. Sonsendegui was 3rd, Sterling Moss now 4th, Rick Bourne 5th, and onto the leaderboard at last, Ron Gammons in 6th. Into Italy and the Tre Cime special test, one of the most daunting sections of the rally. Away go the Spaniards, Sonsendegui and Beaufil, through the tight chicane made of cones at the very start of the test. Lopez's chances were to evaporate here as a broken throttle cable slowed their Mini, and they only just made it up the hill. Closing on them at the finish are the Bournes, who started long after the Belgians, but have now caught right up. Out leaps Jane to stop the clock, the pair now up to 3rd position. Fastest up the Tre Cime hill climb, Ron Gammons and former Monte Carlo rally winner Paul Easter in their MGB. While David Bennett's co-driver Dave Attle has got his technique of leaping from cars off to a fine art. Good job he stopped at the table though. The E-Type was now in 8th. Opre and the Ferrari were 14th, 6th fastest up Tre Cime despite the slippery conditions which didn't really suit the 250. Gijs van Lennep was having great problems with the Austin Healey. He felt that the mixture was too rich and that the car was suffering as a result of the altitude. A frustrating time for the Dutchman, who was down in 15th place by the end of the day. Having struggled up the Tres Chimes climb for much of the way, Lopez and Goblet set about replacing the throttle cable, ready for the Arunzo regularity test. Dramas too for the Eland family. A simple gearbox problem leads to a burnt-out clutch and retirement. Next stop, the rent-a-car desk. Don Griffiths in the Healey Silverstone wasn't enjoying the weather, but he was up to 29th place overall. At the end of day 4, the positions looked like this. Another new leader with Nick Barrow. Ron Gammons, though, now the man to watch, having 40-8 up into 2nd place. The Bournes were 3rd ahead of Sunson Degui, David Bennett's E-Type 5th, Sterling Moss was 6th. Day 5, and some 340 kilometres in prospect for the eager teams on the tight Alpine roads. The route would take the cars first at the Jow regularity test before the blast through the breathtaking Sotoguda Gorge. Nick and Father Tom Barrow having left Cortina in their Mini Cooper running faultlessly and leaving the pursuing MGs with a lot of work to do. The Bournes are experts on regularities, and with confidence in Jane's abilities, Rick was hoping to improve on 3rd place. Let's take a trip up the hillside with Mike and Gina Barker, who are about to discover the only bovine chicane in motorsport. There aren't too many events where you would find wildlife on the tests. I wonder if he's got the right pass to stand there. Norwegian John Haugland, more used to being behind the wheel of a Skoda in World Championship rallies, made his way past the obstacles. On now to Sotoguda, the awesome scenery, just one of the attractions to the cruise on the Mitsubishi Classic Marathon, as well as the chance to drive on some fabulous roads. Ian Shapland and Joe Cooper with the Mercedes 220 SE, a very big car to fling around these tight roads. They were just ahead of Keith Clements with the Jowett Jupiter. The cars wend their way to Murano for the overnight halt after another day of very hard driving. The results now saw Ron Gammons in the lead with the MGB, the Barrows 2nd in their Mini, the Bournes 3rd in their Morgan. David Bennett was 4th with the E-Type, and the Lotus Cortina of Sunson Degui headed off Sterling Moss, who was 6th in the MGB. The final day, the final test, the Stelvio Pass with 48 hairpins on the Alpine roads. The weather wasn't quite what the crews had been expecting though, and this was going to make life very difficult. Just 1 second is the lead that Ron Gammons has over the Barrows, and he's really going to need to go for it on this test to keep that lead. Power, bravery and handling will all count up the Stelvio Pass. Through the hairpins, accelerating up the climb. But behind the MGB, the Mini is really being flung around in fine style, clobbering the curbs, scrabbling for grip, Barrow foot down, hoping for victory. Ron's son Malcolm is going well in his MGB, fending off the Barkers, with yet more unpleasant weather for them to contend with in the XK120. On board again with Gijs van Lennep. Remember, he borrowed this car. Translations available on request, but in any language, that's the end of Van Lennep's marathon and the Austin Healey. Michel O'Prey and René Smeets were to finish 10th on their first marathon. The delectable Ferrari 250, one of the stars of the show in terms of looks and sound. It battled on to the finish despite a clutch problem. Manchester pilots Tony Richardson and Andy Matheson clinched a Gold Cup for their 3rd consecutive marathon without loss of points. So after a week's very hard driving throughout Europe, the overall results of the 1992 Mitsubishi Classic Marathon saw victory for Ron Gammons and Paul Easter in their MGB. They finished just 2 seconds ahead of the husband and wife team and Rick and Jane Bourne, with the E-Type Jaguar of David Bennett and Dave Assel in 3rd. The Barrows were 4th in their Mini, the Spanish Lotus Cortina of Sunson Degui and Beaufort was 5th, while John Haugland and Ray Dale were 6th in their MGB. The weather in Murano was a little bit more inviting than it had been on the Stelvio Pass, as in comes the 5th different winner in 5 classic marathons. The winners of the 1992 Mitsubishi Classic Marathon, Paul Easter and a delighted Ron Gammons.